Good morning and welcome to Lattes and Leaders with Dr. Brad Johnson, best-selling author and accomplished public speaker specializing in education and educational leadership. I am your co-host, Jeremy Johnson, organizational psychology consultant specializing in career coaching, training, and development. Meet us here each week to discuss topics in education and leadership and meet with some of the top education talent and thought partners from across the globe. So grab your latte, sit back, and enjoy a relaxed conversation that will leave you informed and encouraged.
Good morning and welcome to Lattes and Leaders. And I am super excited to have Dr. Holly Ferguson with us this morning. Good morning. How are you doing?
Good morning. I'm doing great, Dr. Johnson. Thanks for having me.
Oh, absolutely. It's a pleasure to be here. I've been excited to meet you. I know we've dialogued a little online with my last book, so it's good to finally meet you. So, first of all, let's just get started with you maybe sharing a little bit of your educational journey with us and, how you got to where you are today.
Okay, a little bit of obviously, this is, I think, I'm starting year 27, so there's a little bit of story behind 27 years. Uh, I was actually a first time college graduate out of my family. No one had ever gone to college. I was fortunate to receive a scholarship, so that helped with just the financial impact of that, and got a degree in teaching elementary education. I was a mid-year graduate, so I got a mid-year job in Prosper ISD as a third grade teacher. There were about 700 students in the entire district at that point in time, so it was a very small farming community, and that was in the late 90s. And then about 4 years in, well, probably about 2 years in, I decided to start working on my master's and go back to school. And at that time, Frisco ISD was booming and growing rapidly. And so I decided to make the move over there, and was a great decision. Had great learning opportunities there, great leaders that I worked with who really poured into me. So I stayed there for 6 years, and then I made my way back to Prosper because our oldest child, it was time for him to go to kindergarten. And so I came back to Prosper, and I actually ended up at the very exact school that I started in as a brand new teacher as the principal. So that was a really neat moment to kind of come full circle in that moment. And so the district at that point in time probably had about 2,700 students in the entire district. And then I served at the elementary school for 3 years. And then I was asked to move over to Rogers Middle School and open up our fifth and sixth grade campus for the entire district. So I took in every single kiddo from across the district, and we just continued to grow and continued to just be moving on that trajectory of being one of the fastest growing districts in the state of Texas. And about 4 years after being Rogers Middle School principal, superintendent asked me to come over and do curriculum and instruction and lead that work. And so I made my move over to central administration and have just been so blessed and fortunate to really be involved in really impacting the learning of students in Prosper ISD along with an amazing team. Certainly can't do the work alone. So served as executive director, and then on to assistant superintendent, and then associate superintendent, and then in 2020 uh, took the role as the superintendent in Prosper ISD, which was a great time because the world was going through a global pandemic. And so this will begin my 5th year as the superintendent in Prosper ISD.
That's interesting. And yeah, in a minute, I'll ask you a question that hopefully you can share a little bit about that experience with COVID, because I'm always interested in that because we all experienced it, but we all kind of experienced it a little different based on where we were located, state, and, governing rules and things like that. So, but
Yes.
before we get there, I would like to know, what do you think, because you've been doing this for a while now. I still got you beat, but because I'm 30 years, so but you're not too far behind. But what do you think is the most important attribute of an effective leader?
I've done a lot of soul searching on this very topic, and so it's a great question for you to ask. Um, I think that leadership, especially in the environment we're in right now, with all of the different voices that are coming at you, whether it's nationally, state level, your local community, what I have found is probably the most important thing for a leader is that you truly know who you are and where your feet are planted. Because if you don't, those voices and all those opinions will start swaying you all over the place, and it just gets really messy and really inconsistent. And that's a lot of soul searching and a lot of reflection to really understand how many voices were pushing me. I think as educators, just by nature, we're pleasers. We want people to be happy. We want there to be calm waters and everybody getting along, because we know at the end of the day, if the adults are infighting, then kids are probably being disrupted in their learning and their opportunities. And so I would say that that's really one of the things that I've learned is just um, to kind of let go of people who want me to be one thing or another, but to truly know who I am. So when I look in that mirror, no matter what their opinion is, at the end of the day, Holly Ferguson knows who she is and what she believes in, and that those opinions can be their opinion. And I say this a lot, but everyone's entitled to their opinion, and that includes me.
Absolutely. And, I often talk with teachers about that. Everybody's an expert on education and everybody's willing to tell you what you need to do, or they're always offering advice, even if it's unsolicited. But it's true of the leaders as well. And, especially I would imagine in the superintendent role, it's similar to the principal. I'm like, someone's always going to be mad with you.
Yes.
Even if you're doing everything, as perfect as ever been done, but that's just the nature of human beings. So I think that is so important that you trust yourself more than others first. And the other thing is, and I've lived this way and it kind of resonates with what you're saying is, I don't really listen to a lot of critique if it's not from someone that hasn't, built me up first, or, had that connection with me to begin with. And I think that helps a lot too. So we talked a minute ago about the COVID. So, and you don't have to use that example, but what are some challenges, or what do you think maybe is the biggest challenge of being an educational leader?
I think the biggest challenge, and I talk to my team a lot about this, especially through the COVID years and all the political topics that became kind of the next hot topic across the nation, because it wasn't just in your own local school district, whether it was books or CRT or whatever the topic was. Um, how do we push that noise down so that we can stay on course with where we need to be, right? That we're making momentum. I feel like that there were so many moments because of just it felt like personal attacks, it felt like professional attacks. And what I would find is when I was doing one-on-one check-ins with leaders, or I was doing, small group meetings with leaders, or even large group meetings, there was almost this memorializing of the mourning of what we once had as educators and the environment that we used to
Mm.
get to work in. And I kind of kick myself because the amount of time that was wasted. And as a leader, I should have just said, tell me what's going right at your campus, or tell me what's going right in this program that we've designed for student learning. But what I would find is that many of those conversations would just center back into whatever the hottest topic was, which is what those hot topics were wanting to happen, is to disrupt and really get us our focus and attention off of what was most important, our students and their learning and the environment that we could create for them. And just tons of hours lost in conversation about how to fix something that people were telling us that were broken. But at the end of the day, we couldn't fix it because, number one, it was a national topic to move schools one way or the other. But also what we knew that was happening inside of the school, it wasn't a true reality. That really was not happening. But the amount of hours we burned listening to those things, leaning into those things, having conversations, it actually put us behind on where we needed to be for kids. And that's probably one of my greatest regrets because that as a leader that you push those distractions out of the way. I just think those distractions had become so prevalent in social media and just society, um, and trying to dispel those rumors, those false statements that were just permeating all over, but really just the amount of time lost, it makes me sick to think about how much time we lost with kids because we were trying to solve something that was never going to be solved.
Yeah, you're so right. And I like the point that you talked about of focusing on what they're doing right in the schools. Because I think, again, that goes back to kind of our whole culture, society. Even with education, to the extent you think about with students, we're always focusing on their areas of weakness or where they need to grow. And we
Mhm.
never focus on what are their strengths, what do they do well. And that tends to be at every level, even as adults in the business world, in the education world. And so it's so important, I think, like you said, if we're always looking to try and fix everything everybody says broken, I mean, you're just going to wear yourself out. You know, it's like just treading water. You're never going to
Yes.
make any progress. So, yeah, I think to reframe that and to say, hey, let's look at what we're doing right. And then, if something needs to be adjusted or whatever. But yeah, I think the focus should always be on what we're doing well, what we can expand on that. Even, one of the things I talk about with students is, find their strengths, build on those strengths. What you'll find is when they build on those strengths, they can do other things a little better than
Mhm.
just focusing on their weakness. Because if that's all you talk about, if that's all we fixate on, it's just a very negative environment all the way around. So that's so true and a good point. You mentioned earlier, you talked about teachers being, so kind, caring, empathetic, and high agreeableness, personality trait. And sometimes as leaders, how do you best relate to them? And I guess I'm going back to the relationship thing because that's what I always talk about. Is there any way you specifically try to build those relationships or encourage them? Because, teachers, like we say, they're very affirmational. And so they need affirmation too. And so is there anything you do specifically or just in general?
There is. I've always promised myself, or I always promised myself, that when I walked away from the classroom to go into administration, that I would never forget what it was like to be a teacher and the hard work, but the very critical and vital work that you do in that classroom, and truly the power that you have to impact kids, being the leader inside that setting. A couple things that I do along with our team, because right, no leader can do anything alone. It's really the collective efforts of paraprofessionals, teachers, right, other leaders within the district, school board. So one thing that we do because of our fast growth, because we onboard, like this year, we'll onboard over 550 new employees, and that's from bus drivers to paraprofessionals. Last year, we onboarded over 900 uh, new employees. And so when you think about that magnitude, what we do is the very first thing that happens for a new employee once that recommendation has been made to hire is that they come in for a new hire session, and I speak to them about our culture. I speak to them about really what is the heart of Prosper ISD and what makes this place so special and what I'm going to expect from them. And what I always tell them is excellence every day in every way is what we're going after. We're perfectly imperfect people, so perfection would be really hard to hit every day, but we can certainly strive for excellence. So, really beginning with that, I talk to them a lot too about that they're going to see me and to not get very uncomfortable when I just pop into their classroom because I want to remember
Mm,
and really connect to why I'm doing this. It would be easy for me to sit in an office all day because there's plenty of work to do in an office, but that's not why I'm here. And my intent, my purpose behind the work that I'm doing as a leader is connected into that very classroom, and that I want to be present and really be in awe of what they do and the magic that happens every single second within the walls of our schools and well with outside the walls of our school. And right now, I am on a mission. So I write a personalized note to each teacher in the district. I used to write on their whiteboards, and I would write some motivational saying, something that really tied to the core and the heart of who we are in Prosper ISD, and sign that. So when you think about 4,000 employees, probably, 1,800 to 2,000 of them being classroom teachers, that's a lot of notes to write. But what it gives me the opportunity to do is to be in every single space that our kids will be learning in, but also that our educators will be working in, and really they're spending the majority of their waking hours within those buildings. So right now, I've kind of transitioned because my team is amazing and came up with a great idea, but our custodial service likes to clean the boards. And so what I found myself is that they would clean the boards during breaks, and then I'd have teachers going, "Can you come back and write on my board?" The custodian erased the message, so I'm now writing on these whiteboard magnetic 8.5 by 11 in a Sharpie, and then placing them in their room on their board. It- Something small but does a ton of good, right? And a lot of teachers really saying how much that means to them that the superintendent would come and do that. I try to be as relatable as I possibly can because my title sometimes can it can make you feel as though you're not relatable or you're not human, right? And just trying to be present, doing car line in the morning to go see kids and greet them, but also to engage with staff, being present on campuses, and then in the evenings, probably at least 4, if not 5 days out of the school week, am I at some evening event, right? Whether it's athletics or fine arts, banquets, whatever it might be, just to be present because I feel like that sometimes as a superintendent or as a leader, you can really lose the core of who you are if you're not constantly reminded of why you're doing the work. And how we get reminded is being those touch points with the educators, but also those multiple touch points with students, and then I think also with our parents and community. How do you stay connected and really hear what their hopes, dreams, and aspirations are for the school district that they've chosen?
Yeah, that's so true. And I mean, you started right off with trying or saying that it's important to remember what it was like in the classroom. And, we're always telling teachers to remember their why, but leaders have to as well. And, for the teachers, it's the student, and for leaders, it's the staff, it's the teachers. And, I call them post-its of praise. And those are
Mhm.
teachers and administrators, those are as precious to them as the notes from students are to the teachers. They value them. When I post something like that online, I'll get hundreds of messages from, teachers saying, "Oh my goodness, yeah, this principal did it," or this not a lot of superintendents. So maybe that's something they can think about and work on, because I do like that. I understand, being at the district level, I mean, you always have something to do and you could justify being in your office the whole time, every day. But at the end of the day, like you said, leadership is about the people and connecting with the
Mhm.
people and inspiring them. And so when they see you in the hallways of their school, that resonates, being seen, just being, they always talk about the biggest part of parenting is being there. It's the same way in leadership. It's just being there, being present, and let them know that you're there for them. That just makes a big difference. And then, yeah, those notes, I mean, it's so funny. They wanted to come back and rewrite them because it does mean so much. And sometimes I think as leaders, they may forget how important that is and the morale that it builds,
Mhm.
because those types of things really do reflect morale in a building or in a school district. So that's so important. We all almost always have stories, and especially teachers share how they got into teaching, but at the beginning as a teacher yourself, but through your own, let's say K through 12 experience. Although I'm so old, I didn't actually go to kindergarten. But was there a teacher or maybe a couple of teachers that influenced you or made a difference or kind of set you on this course?
Gosh, that list is so long. There's so many great educators, teachers that I had that I think got me to where I am today. No, I know that they got me to where I am today. And I actually do something very similar talking about those favorite teachers. So our new employees, I ask them before I get started speaking to put kindergarten through 12th grade on a piece of paper and to write the names of their teachers, right? And then ultimately, I asked them to circle the name of the one that it got them in this space, in this room, to make them want to be connected to education. And then I have a few of them tell that story. And it always amazes me, Brad, that just the smile that comes over their face, but they never talk about the books and the learning. They always talk about the way that that teacher made them feel. And it's no different for any one of us. When I think about the educators that I had, numerous coaches that I had that really impacted me because there's a lot of just learning how to be dedicated, committed, disciplined, work hard, harder than the average person. So there's a lot of lessons that I learned from that. But probably my very favorite teacher was Rick Carey, and he was my biology teacher. And there was just something special about the way that he brought us together as a class. There was a camaraderie with us, and then the way he just listened to us. And you just never knew what you were going to walk into, right, with the class. You just knew something great was going to happen, but you didn't know what it was going to be. But so much so that we, as the students, when I think about the way that he listened to us and the way he really leaned in, is that we really campaigned to stay together as a class and um, really task him with how will you keep us together because just the chemistry that we had, even though it was just a class period out of the day, um, he ended up going to the administration and creating a biology 2 class for us so that we could stay together.
Oh,
And I didn't know it at the time, but then when I went to college and started working on my education courses, my biology class for educators, I then realized that he had used the exact textbook that I was offered in college. And so for him to just go to that level to really do that research, and truly the district that I grew up in was super small. So I know it was not like he turned it over to the curriculum department and said, "Hey, come up with something." He was truly tasked with, how will you make this happen for kids? And so he did that. And I mean, I just remember sitting in college thinking, I already know all of these things, right? Because he had taught all of that material. And it wasn't it was just him listening to kids and listening to what their hopes, dreams, and aspirations for what they wanted, and then trying to find a way. And it was just so above and beyond, I think just the way he made us all feel, like he just made us feel like we were the most important people in the world. And that I was like, I've got to go do this because if he can make somebody feel this way, like if I can do half of what he's done, like I'll make the world a better place. And so I think too, my mom served on a school board in the district that I grew up in. And so watching her commitment to education, trying to make an educational system better. But then she also served as a paraprofessional in a neighboring district for 25 years. And just hearing the stories, the impact, the way that we collectively as a family would try to give back to the students that she was serving. I remember didn't have a ton growing up, but my mom and dad, um, my dad worked for a company, basically factory work, and he and some of the guys that he worked with, my mom said, "Hey, there's this family, and they're not going to have Christmas," and so one of the guys dressed up as Santa, and they collected all these different toys, right? And then we go to the house to go deliver and make Christmas happen for this family that was obviously living in poverty, but those are moments that I'm like, wow, the power, right, of education.
oh, absolutely. And, we always ask teachers and, educators, we asked who influenced you. But, I like to share with them, you influence so many other children than just the ones that go into education as well. They influence the ones that go into the business world or science world or whatever, medicine, or, just to start their own businesses. They still you can ask, as I travel, like if I sit beside someone, I'll usually ask, was there a teacher that influenced you? And they light up, like you said, they
Hmm.
just, you remember that person. And what's cool too is it's not just the teachers, but, I always like to share. I remember my first bus driver, and this was, half a century ago that I don't even like to admit that. But I remember her and her attitude. And, when we would get on in the morning, just her, good morning, and just, at 7 in the morning or whatever. And then in the afternoon going home, how was your day? Did you have a good day? And so, everybody, and that's why, like, you talked about seeking excellence. It's so important for everybody, not just the teachers, but every role from the custodian to the front office to, have that mindset. I always say, be world class, be your very best every day.
Hmm.
And because they're all impacting lives, every one of them. And so that's, we have those teachers are just so important. It's a shame that they aren't viewed in society better than they are, because we all remember that teacher or two or more. Like you said, for some of us it was many that really influenced us. And so that's so wonderful, and that's so neat to, yeah, have someone that inspired you, and that, like you said, raised your expectations. I always, when my quote, part of it is relationships before rigor, and people are like, oh, well, you need rigor, and I'm like, yeah, but you never get there until you have that relationship first. It's just like with your children. When you have that good relationship with your children, there's not much they won't do to please you, or
Yeah,
to do for you. And it's the same way with teachers. You build those strong relationships, and they know that you're in their corner and care about them and want the best for them. You can raise those expectations, and they'll usually rise to them. Most of them will rise to them, and that
100%.
benefits everyone. All right. So as a superintendent, you have a particularly stressful job. We always talk about work-life balance, which I don't think there is. I always say there's just life, and you just got to figure out how to take care of yourself in it. What do you do for self-care? To manage and to stay on top, and so that you can bring your best every day as well.
So, this one has been one that I think I've done a lot of soul searching too. And I think too, just the older you get, the more you reflect on really kind of what helps you get settled, find that inner peace. Um, well, so I have attended the same exact church for 49 years. Um, and I didn't realize how important that church was, I think, until I became a superintendent. Uh, sitting, always sit on the back pew, family has always sat there, and there's just a sense of peace that just kind of centers and resettles me somehow, some way. Um, and I think it's because of just the history. I think it's the family connections within that space. I look over my back shoulder and there's a stained glass window and it's got my great grandparents' name on it in their memory. So just the amount of history, tradition that really grounds me to that place. And I think it's just a good reminder of, eh, finding out, who are you really at the end of the day. Right. And the beautiful thing is it's a small congregation, but there's people in there that they have watched me grow up literally. And there's almost an opportunity to go back to being a kid in that church
Mm,
when you
okay.
walk into that
Yeah,
space, just because of kind of the age and wisdom that makes up the congregation, and you will kind of forever be that age, right? So that's one thing that is very important. So I think that's your spiritual well-being as a leader. You've got to take care of whatever that means
absolutely.
for you.
Yeah.
The other thing that I do is, so I get up every morning and I go and work out. Typically, I have my AirPods in and I've got an audio book on, and it's something about just making yourself better, right? Or really understanding your worth. And so always trying to find those audio books that really pour into me as a leader, not so much for the learning piece of the leadership, I think, but really at the core, what are the things that are going to speak life into you. And one of the books that I most recently have been listening to, one of the things that the author says is that God's rejection, when you hear the no, is actually his protection.
Mm,
And that just resonated with me because, right, how many times, especially as a leader, are we feel like we've been rejected or that it's a no, right? And how do you kind of pick yourself back up? But really reframing that, and when she said that, I was like, I've never really thought about that. That God's rejection is His protection from what is to come, and that really, I think, really says it all, and it's really helped me kind of find inner peace. But I think just, trying to take care of your overall well-being, because the countless hours in this job, it's just you could find yourself just really unhealthy and really in a just a really bad place, and you've got to keep yourself healthy. Um, and too, I think making sure that you don't cancel those appointments when you need to go to the doctor or when your body's telling you something, making sure that you find rest, right? And allowing yourself to be able to go home, even though it may not be, you may still have hours of work left, but how do you find that time? And when I'm on breaks too, this has taken me some time because I'm very driven, and it's hard to cut my mind off from what work needs to be done in this school district. But, like, for example, we closed the district down for 2 weeks and still checking email, still watching, text and things like that, because you do have a school board to answer to, and but really trying to be present and not work, right?
hmm
And if it means you wanna binge watch something on Netflix, then binge watch, right? But don't put the computer in front of you while you're doing it. So
Right.
really trying to hold myself accountable to some of those things. But I will tell you too, I'm really blessed. I have a school board president who I actually said this to him the other day. I said, "You must have told the rest of the board to make sure that they did not reach out to me over the 2-week period." 'Cause I said, I found myself after a few days thinking, I haven't gotten a text, I haven't had a phone call or an
What's
email.
wrong?
Yeah, something's going on. Maybe I'm getting fired when I get back. I don't know. But I said, "I just wanna tell you thank you, right, for protecting those
Mm,
few moments that I had to just be fully present and disconnect and not feel like I've gotta go fix something or take care of something." And I said, "And I know that you were behind it." And he just kinda laughed, and he said, "Well," he goes, "Sometimes things can just wait." And I'm like, "You're correct, they can."
that's so true, and it's something that especially when people are new into roles, whether it's a new teacher or a new administrator. They feel like everything's got to be done, everything's got to be perfect, and it just gets overwhelming so fast. And it's like they have to realize that some things can just wait, and you do sometimes you just have to call a timeout and take time for yourself. I spoke at a school in Lampus, like might have been a couple of years ago now, and but I remember the principal, when I was done, he got up and oh, he had been in education, I guess, 40 years now. I think he's retired, but he was like, when you talk about that and taking time for yourself and stuff, he's like, I've never thought about that. Teachers need a mental health day too sometimes. And he's like, so I'm telling you, and so this was after it, he's like, I'm telling you, when you need a mental health day, take it. The only thing I
Yeah.
ask is that you all don't take it the same day.
Yes. It's interesting that you bring that up, Brad, because that's something since the pandemic. We have a suicide peer-to-peer, uh, prevention program, and so we've done a ton of work on the mental health of our kids. But one thing that I continually am concerned about are the health of these educators, right? No matter what role they're playing, whether they're the bus driver or whatever it might be. And so we've really gotten in a mode, and it's always like this really nice surprise. But the board allows me to work with my team to figure out a day during the year that is maybe a professional learning day. So that way kids are not already scheduled and parents weren't expecting that. But we'll surprise our staff with a mental health day and just tell them to go do something that gives them joy, right? Go take care of yourself. If you want to read, work out, spend time with your kids, whatever it is that fills your bucket. And that gift of time, like I'm always amazed when I send that email to let them
Hmm.
know that they've got a mental health day. It's almost like you can hear an audible sigh of
Hmm.
relief across this district. And I had one of the staff members, because we did one this year, I think it was in April, right? And so, teachers or staff, they're spent by April. Like I can see the light at the end of the tunnel, but I'm about to
Right.
just flip a table. And one of them emailed me back, and I'm assuming she probably hasn't been with us super long, but she said, I'm just amazed that a school board, that a school district would do this. She said, I've been telling all of my friends who are in other districts, because so many times school districts talk about mental health and their staff and how to take care of them, but they show no action and they really do nothing about it. And she said, it's so refreshing to be in a school district where there's meaning behind the words of "we'll take care of our staff," even if it's just a day, right? At least you all did something to pour back into the staff, to
Exactly.
recognize the hard work and the emotional lift that comes with this job. And um, no one has ever said to me, "Nope, I've got to go to work. Like I got to be there." Now, I know that people are probably working at home, and
Maybe.
that's your
Yeah.
choice. But at
Yeah.
least you
Right.
had the time to go do what you felt like you needed to do to take care of yourself.
Well, and that's so true. And that's one of the things that I, try to emphasize because districts and even school leaders, they're real good about telling them you need to take care of yourself. But like you said, it's not empty words. I know they have good intent behind it. But what we forget is those teachers are those highly agreeable people that,
Yeah.
won't do it unless you actually carve out that time like you're talking about for them to do it. Because if you had just said come in and work on your own today or whatever, if you hadn't have made said you don't have to come in, they would feel obligated to be there and to be doing something.
Yeah.
Teachers are always their own worst critic and just feel guilty about taking time for themselves. And so I'm like, don't just tell them about self-care, tell them they'll need it. You have to, model it or give them opportunities for that.
Well, force them, right? Make them take the time. And, I think too, being a mom, I will never forget, my kids are now grown, but I'll never forget how hard it was in the morning to get them ready. Right, and get them in the car and get them to school, and or childcare, whatever it was that we were having to do, what stage of life we were in. And when you think about the majority of your teachers, the majority of them are moms, about 75%, right? Or moms. But I also have dads that are hustling trying to get kids in the morning. And just to be able to cook breakfast for your family, to sit on a couch and watch cartoons, right? Those little things, it
Little
just
things.
means the world that you get that time with them, and it just can fill your bucket to a point that, yeah, I can get this done, right? And I'll be better tomorrow. So giving them time just gives all the kids they're serving a better tomorrow, right? As soon as we can
Absolutely.
get them back in after they've had some time to really feel like they've been poured into.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And yeah, teachers don't need much, but they do need something. And
Yeah.
yeah, you're exactly right. That makes such a big difference. Your thing about no was interesting to me earlier because I always use the analogy because I for some reason, stray cats think my house is their home. So it eventually does become that. But there's one that when he comes in, he always wants to go out. So he just sits at the door, and I'm like, no, especially like if I know there's about to be a storm, which here in Atlanta in the South, we get, the thunderstorms and all. And so if I know, storms are coming, I'm like, no, no, no. And like you said, he doesn't get it. He doesn't understand it, kind of like us. But I remember there was one instance where he was driving me crazy. I'm like, okay, I'm going to let you go out. I know there's a storm coming, but I'm going to let you go out. The moment I opened the door and stepped out on the deck, there was a clap of thunder so loud. He climbed over, jumped over me backwards back into the house. And I'm like, see, dummy, I was looking out for you. You just didn't know it. And so that, I love to share that story because you're so right. because I tell people, if you didn't get that job, you didn't get that, that new role or what you were really hoping for, think of it as a positive. Think of it as
Yeah.
that, that wasn't your path. And so, hopefully we keep that. And I know for some people that's hard in the middle of it or when it happens, but you're so right. And I try to share, there was a job I thought I should have had. I know I should have had it, but I didn't have it. But I'm glad now that I didn't.
Yes.
It would have changed the trajectory of my life. And so, all those closed doors and those no's, were sending me on the right path. And so, it's just help. It's a healthy way to look at it and so important. All right. So I have one last tough question for you.
Okay.
Since this is lattes and leaders. So what is your hot beverage of choice? Is it coffee, latte, cappuccino, none of the above? What is your guilty pleasure?
Well, unfortunately, I do not drink coffee. I always joke because people say, a lot of times I'll have parents or just different people like, "Hey, do you want me to pick up Starbucks for you?" And I'm like, "No, I don't drink coffee, and you wouldn't want to see me on coffee because I'm kind of wired to just be a lot of energy and a lot coming at you." And so I actually don't. It's actually a lot of water. And that's about it. A glass of orange juice in the morning and I'm out the door, but that's about what I do. But no, not coffee. I will say, now in around Christmas time when it gets cold, I do every once in a while go and get a hot chocolate, but that's about the level of it. Um, but no, so when this was sent, I was like, well, somebody who doesn't drink a latte will be on the latte with leaders.
Well, you know what? You actually weren't the first one.
Okay.
So I had my friend Willie Spears. You might have heard of him before. He's a speaker too. But anyway, he talked about when he was a child, he went to drink some of his mom's coffee. And he grew up in the South like me, where coffee was an adult beverage. Kids didn't
Uh-huh.
drink
Oh,
it.
yeah.
And so she smacked his hand to put it down. And he's like, I've never drank a cup of coffee because of that. He's like, even as an adult, I'm thinking she's going to smack it out of my.
No, that's so true in the South, but I remember my grandmother, who I adored, but, I mean, my sister and I, little bitty kids and sitting there, and she'd make us pancakes and give us coffee, and, of course, it was a lot of sugar and cream. I'm sure my mother was not very appreciative when we got home, but I never really liked it. I love the smell of it, but I just don't like it.
Yeah. We call in Georgia, in this part of the South, we call that because somebody told me, well, I only like coffee that has a lot of cream and a lot of sugar. And I'm like, well, we call that coffee pie. So that's not really coffee, I
True.
don't think, but yeah. Oh my goodness. Was there any nugget of wisdom or anything you want to share with leaders or teachers before we wrap up?
I mean, I think I don't know that it's a nugget of wisdom, but just always be paying attention to the details that no one else sees, right? When it comes to your people, just watching them, and seeing something that means something to them or listening to their words. And if they tell you that their favorite dessert is a peach cobbler, then you know what? Be willing to bake them a peach cobbler if that's what it means. Or you have an interaction with them and then following up to write a note to let them know how much that moment meant. I think this world, right? And the older I get, the more people it feels like that we've lost. And recently just lost a really great school administrator. And I kick myself because I'm like, why didn't I reach out to him more? Why didn't I, make that phone call? And so just don't ever be too busy for the people you're serving because it's really easy to do. Um, but you may not get a tomorrow with them. And so make the most of the moments you do have with them.
That's so true. Yeah. And just the thought, the taking a moment is just so we don't because when people do it to us, we know how important it is. And so you're so right, just taking the time to do that and just remember the humanity of us all, I think is
Yes.
just so important. So, well, thank you for being on today. I loved it, loved your stories, and appreciate having you.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
This has been Lattes and Leaders with Dr. Brad Johnson. We hope that you leave today feeling informed and inspired. For more educational content, be sure to add this podcast to your list and follow Dr. Johnson on any and all social media platforms. For more information on Dr. Johnson, Jeremy Johnson, and special guest, check out drbradjohnson.com. That is DOCTOR, bradjohnson.com. Hope to have you back soon.